Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our webinar today. My name is Martin Kaltenberg from the Semantic Web Company located in Vienna in Austria. And I would like to welcome you to the webinar PoolParty for Sustainable Development with a focus on the climate tagger. So I'm very happy today to have three guests also here in the webinar. So on the one hand side, as a first speaker, also introducing the agenda, we will have Florian Bauer, who is COO and Director of Open Knowledge of REEEP, the Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency Partnership. As a second speaker, we have Quinn Reifmesser here, who is Senior Project Manager on REEEP. And after Florian giving us an introduction why climate smart decisions require connected knowledge systems, Quinn will take us to a tour through the climate tagger, means a concrete solution to connect climate knowledge. As a third part of our webinar, I will introduce you briefly what is under the hood of climate tagger. It is PoolParty Semantic Suite, and a few more use cases that PoolParty is used in the area of sustainable development. And finally, we have Sukaina Parvani from SEI in Oxford, who will tell us about weadapt.org. That is a learning platform using the climate tagger, and she will tell us about the platform itself and how it makes use of the climate tagger. So a few remarks regarding the webinar. The slides will be provided in the following week, so all of the slides will be sent, and we will send you the links to the slides very shortly after our webinar today. And the webinar is being recorded, and we will also provide the recording, so if you see it's interesting and you would like to share it with colleagues or friends, that feel free just to send the link to the recording that we have in place. Finally, one remark: in our webinar tool on the right bottom you have a chat, and after the four speakers we have in place, we will open a Q&A session, and you can at any time you want to put a question that comes to your mind into this chat, and my colleague Thomas, who does here the technical operation of the webinar, collects it, and I will moderate afterwards, and we will hand over questions to our speakers and panelists. So that's all for the beginning from my side, and I'm very happy to hand over to Florian of REEEP.
Yeah, hello. Good afternoon, everyone. Very warm welcome from my side to this webinar, and thank you very much for Martin for inviting me to speak today at this webinar. As Martin said, I'm Chief Operations Officer and Director of Open Knowledge in an organization called REEEP, the Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency Partnership. And in this organization, we work a lot around the topics of how we can effectively connect knowledge systems in the climate sector. How can we make sure that the users actually receive the knowledge and the information and the knowledge around climate that they should have? And that's going to be the part of my introduction today. And then I'll hand over to my colleague Quinn, who will go more into detail regarding the actual tool, the climate tagger, that we want to present today. But let me start first with framing a little bit the challenge ahead. When we think about our future, we all, I think, are in agreement that there is a big challenge related to climate change ahead, and a lot of, when you talk to people working in that sectors, when you talk to people in organizations who have some kind of climate change awareness, you often hear words and phrases like we have to build a climate resilient future, how can we do climate smart development, and how can we include climate smart decisions in our decision-making process. Well, if we do that, then a big challenge that we are at the moment facing is that many more people will need to make use of high-quality climate information. And I'm mentioning that especially because when I started to work in that field a few years ago, around 10 years ago, there still was a need for much more information. There was an information gap very often, and that turned into the last years very much into a bit an information overload that we have. We have so many platforms and information portals that provide information on climate change that this is a challenge. But the real challenge is how can we ensure that those people who want to take climate smart decisions get the knowledge that they need. So some of the questions that arisen in previous meetings that we had together with a lot of organizations working in that field is, well, actually, where do the users who need to get the knowledge actually get the knowledge from? Coming back to the question, who are actually these users, those users, who are they and what needs do they have? And what kind of information do these users need? Very often there's also a question that needs to be asked, which is, how does this information that we have need to be presented to enable effective learning and effective use of that information for these users? And a very interesting question that I think is very close to my heart also and to the work that we're doing is, how can we work together to be more effective in providing this kind of information? And finally, what is actually needed to improve the quality and use of climate knowledge in decision making? So these are all questions that are around in the meetings and events and discussions that we are having, and I think they all lead to the topic that we are discussing here today. One of the groups which actually is very active in discussing those topics is a group called the Climate Knowledge Brokers Group. This is a network of organizations and people which want to work on improving the quality and use of climate-related knowledge in decision-making. A bunch of highly skilled and interested people who want to make it more effective and efficient on how climate information is presented, how we work together, and so on. It is funded by the Climate Development Knowledge Network, and REEEP is hosting the kind of secretariat, the coordination hub of that group. And I mentioned that here because this group was an essential part of the development of the climate tagger that we will present later on. So this group of climate knowledge brokers consists of hundreds and hundreds of knowledge brokers, and I'll show you that kind of logo soup just for the sake of showing you the big amount and vast amount of different players in that field, and that's just a very small excerpt of organizations and platforms involved in the group. But it shows already one of the issues that we're having here. We have a lot of different players in that field who have high quality, very relevant, good information, but in lots of different places. Well, now this Climate Knowledge Broker Group is mainly acting and working on 4 challenges that knowledge brokers in the field of climate information face. The first one is we need to understand our users well, and I've already touched on this. I think this is an absolutely essential thing. The second one is we need to help users of climate information to find the right platform on where they can find the information that they need, which we call signposting the right platforms. The third one is about connecting climate websites, which is basically the topic of the webinar today. And the fourth one is we need to be very effective in learning from each other on what we are doing and how we are doing it. I want to start with very briefly with understanding the user needs, because I think it's absolutely essential that we are aware that all the things that we are doing when we talk about connecting climate portals, making climate information available, is it all has to be based on user needs. We need to understand what the users need, and we have had a quite interesting undertaking in the Climate Knowledge Brokers Group in the past months, which was that we wrote a book together. More than 80 people provided input to that book. We had 18 contributors to the book who brought it all together as authors, and it's called the Climate Knowledge Brokers Manifesto. The URL that you see here on the screen is the one where you can download a free copy of it, and I'm showing that to you because the book has in the book, one of the big chapters is about user needs. We have identified 5 different groups of users, of user types, and we didn't want to split them in the usual, the policymaker, the investor, and so on, but we tried to categorize them a little bit different this time, and we came to the conclusion that there is around 5 types of possible users of climate information, ranging from people who are just not aware of the issue of climate change, but they should become aware of it. So they're potential user of climate information. Users who face a lack of quality information. In some fields, especially in developing countries, there is often still a lack of high quality information, and that needs to become available. And then there are three ones which are highly relevant to the topic about connected climate websites, which is very often information is hidden to the user, so they can't find it, they can't access it because of paywalls, they can't even get to that information. Then there is the untailored information, which means it's just a vast amount of things, of information being presented, and it's not possible for the user to identify what's the relevant for them. And then the last one is it's simply too much, simply an overwhelming amount of information. There is now a set of organizations and people which we call climate knowledge brokers, which are working towards addressing those user needs. And some of the ways and how this is done is listed here, but I don't want to go into much more detail in this webinar about this. If you're interested in this, then please have a look in the manifesto and download it and have a look. We explain all those methodologies that climate knowledge brokers have to address these user needs in that book. The aim always is that we want to make informed and aware users of tailored climate knowledge because they can make better decisions which are climate smart. So taking those bottom three user needs lead very, very well into why it is so important to connect climate knowledge when we talk about connecting, when we talk about information portals, web portals, and so on. And that comes to the topic now about connecting climate websites. One of the reasons why this is, I already said that there is a lot of information just around there, and it's kind of an information explosion. Having a look on the figures here, it's from 1992. The increase in articles that are listed on Google on climate change is quite immense, and also the think tanks that are working on climate change is now more than 300 that are listed. You can imagine how much information and knowledge they produce. We in the Climate Knowledge Brokers Group often call that the oceans of climate information. I think also behind my chair you might see the poster, so we use that picture quite often because it feels like an ocean of climate information that we have here. Some of the issues with that ocean is that data and information still very often is stored and presented in silos. So when you think about projects that are going on, when you think about sometimes institutional websites, very often they are built as silos. It is a website that presents some information which is not connected to others. That obviously is not good for users to be able to find that information and for others to reuse that and to work with that information. And the second big issue that we have and that users always talk about is that for users it's very often to find the right kind of information. So they will find parts of it, but it's very hard to get to the tailored information, to the tailored knowledge that they need. And that's a big gap that we have, and that's something that needs to be addressed if we want to allow in the future that all people have access to high quality information that enables them to make climate smart decisions. So that's actually the point when I will stop my introduction and turn to Quinn, who will talk about a tool which does exactly that, which helps to find the right kind of information on this vast amount of knowledge portals and connects those knowledge portals. It's called the Climate Tagger. As said, it's a product that came out of the Climate Knowledge Brokers Group, and I'll leave it to Quinn to talk more about that and show you what it is and what it can do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Florian. This is Martin again. Just a short word in between while we switch to the screen, and we already did it, of Quinn. Yeah, Quinn is Senior Project Manager in REEEP and responsible for the Climate Tagger. And that's it from my side. Quinn, the floor is yours. We're very curious about learning more about the Climate Tagger.
Thank you very much, Martin, and thank you very much, Florian. It's a pleasure to be here today, and I'm happy to be presenting the Climate Tagger. So I'll start by quoting a former president of Ireland, who's one of my favorites, Mary Robinson, and she said, "We are the first generation to be aware of the existence of climate change and the detrimental impacts it will have on the future, and we are also the last generation to have the opportunity to do anything about it." Now, being consciously aware of that, all of us working in this field are constantly publishing information about climate change, whether it's mitigation, adaptation, clean energy strategies, you name it. We're publishing a lot of really useful and important information on the web, assuming that it will meet the user's needs and also get to the users. As Florian mentioned, the user needs very important. Now, while we are doing that, we might not actually be aware of other platforms, portals, or websites that are already publishing similar information, that have already cracked an important area of research that we're currently working on because it's in a silo, as Florian mentioned, or it's in a different language, or we just don't know about it. So what we've done is we've developed a tool that helps to try to manage this information and share it amongst the platforms, portals, and websites across the globe, which are publishing information in the context of climate change, and that's the Climate Tagger. So the Climate Tagger began development in 2011 with funding from CTCN, the government of Germany, and recently CTCN and under UNEP. We're constantly doing more projects, and when we do a project, we develop a new area of the Thesaurus. The Thesaurus is what backs the Climate Tagger, and I will describe the development of the Thesaurus now. What we do when we're developing the Thesaurus is we create, using PoolParty, we create concepts that are published in an area of expertise. So, for example, the Climate Thesaurus now has renewable energy, energy efficiency, green growth, RED+, monitoring and evaluation, greenhouse gas emissions in industry, and the economics of adaptation. The last two were recently developed for CTCN, and when we develop an area of the Thesaurus, we identify 10 to 15 experts across the globe, and we discuss with them over the course of 4 months what key concepts or what keywords do they use when they're publishing information about a certain topic. So as an expert in greenhouse gas emissions in industry, we would say to that expert, so what are your key themes within your area of expertise, and what are the key words that you use when you publish information or when you research information on the internet, for example. And amongst those 10 to 15 experts, we would consistently get say 10 or 15 of them, 10 of the 15 will all agree on one particular key concept, such as cost-benefit analysis should have a hyphen, and the others would say, no, it really shouldn't have a hyphen. So when we're developing the Thesaurus, we don't only develop concepts as what presents itself as a preferred label, but we also do synonyms covering any other alternative spellings, and we do hidden labels. So if there are certain concepts that would be published, nobody ever wants to see cost-benefit analysis with a hyphen, for example, we can still catch that, but we wouldn't display it to the user. So the Climate Thesaurus currently has over 3,000 concepts, and those concepts are all translated into Spanish, French, Portuguese, and German. So therefore, we can connect information across the web that have these concepts and also in different languages. I'm just giving a brief example of the number of experts, the names and the organizations that these experts have come from. So what the Climate Tagger does is, using these concepts, this is a screenshot of the tree view of the Thesaurus. Using these concepts, it can scan any machine-readable text that's on a platform, portal, or website. Now that can be in a document, or it could be a web page itself. And while scanning that particular area of your website, you can decide as the manager of the website which areas are scanned by the Climate Tagger. What we do is we basically make a footprint of every document or page within the website in order to understand what the content is. So I might scan a website that's very much about climate change adaptation, and my footprint of the particular page will tell me that it's about adaptation types, for example. Now, once the Climate Tagger has scanned all the information on your platform, portal, or website, it's then up to you as the manager of your platform to decide how you use that information. And the use cases they vary quite a lot. There's a lot of innovation that's come out of these that goes beyond the 6 that I'm showing you on my screen right now. And Sukena will explain a very innovative use case by WeAdapt at the end of our webinar. But some basic use cases are that you can have connections amongst different pages or different documents within your website based on similar concepts. So for example, one page is about adaptation strategies. If I want to connect my user to other areas of my website that are also about adaptation strategies, I can allow my user to find all similar documentation because it's been tagged with that exact same concept. Another option is to show your users the recommended documentation. So that's using the power of this thesaurus, which is why the thesaurus is not just a number of words, over 3,000 words. They're concepts that are related, trying to map out the complexity of the human mind and an expert working in this field. So, for example, the recommended service allows me to say to my users, well, if you're interested in adaptation strategies, you might also be interested in adaptation types or Earth's integrity. And by implementing the recommended service, then I'm able to allow my user to learn more about a topic and see related information, which can be educational, and it can also just be very useful for the expert or the end user, regardless of their expertise. So that's another area. Those are two use cases that are very common within your own platform or website. Now, you can also cross-link, and this is very important for anyone working in climate change space. It also deals with the silo issue that I just talked about earlier. You can cross-link your resources with other documents or other platforms. So, for example, once I've tagged everything on my platform, and it's stored with the climate tagger just in terms of the URL and which concepts are associated with that URL as a footprint, I can then allow my content to be shared in what's called a content pool. So everything that I've tagged on REEEP's website, for example, gets stored on the content pool. And then if another platform, let's say, for example, CTCN, is interested in gathering my information, they can decide to select me as a source, REEEP, and display all of my related content on their website in terms of, maybe it's a section at the bottom of the page that says related resources. And they can show everything that's similar to the document as I noted, the similar service. So everything that's from REEEP's website about adaptation strategies can then be displayed on CTCN's website. Or they can say, I'm interested in doing recommended documentation, and that can also be using this hierarchy and the relations within the thesaurus to connect those kinds of concepts and display them for the user. So not only can I share my content to the content pool, but I can also pull it down and therefore prevent months of having somebody upload and download. It's automatically showing for my users. Now I'm just going to show you a really brief use case of REEEP's website. So we have the climate tagger implemented on our website, and this is the very first basic use case that I've articulated. This is the similar documentation service. So here we have a web page on REEEP. When we implemented on the REEEP website, we decided that we wanted to tag news and events. You could decide you wanted to tag all of these different areas of your website or just a couple of them. You can also decide if you're going to just do one section. So, say for example, your web page is connected in or divided into different sections. You can actually tell the climate tagger to only tag text in this area or that area of the page. So you could avoid, say for example, tagging the about or the address, which wouldn't show up anyways. It's not a concept. Anyway, so here we have an event about COP coming up, and we have at the bottom we have tags by climate tagger. And if I click on international development, then I'm immediately connected to absolutely everything on the REEEP website that I've decided to tag that has that concept within the footprint of that document. Everything about international development on the REEEP website. I could also implement the relational area and allow my users to see recommended documents. If you're interested in international development, you might be interested in climate negotiations or what have you. So I look forward to discussing this further with everyone that's on the webinar. There's many other use cases, and I'm sure lots of questions that would come out of this, and I'm available to answer those at the end of the call. I will just quickly show how you could implement the climate tagger. We have an API that can be used by any developer that can be implemented however you wish on your own website. It's free of charge. The funding comes from projects, which we're constantly getting new projects to develop the thesaurus further. And when the thesaurus is developed into a new area, for example, something to do with the Clean Air Coalition, which we have on the horizon, then those concepts are free for everyone else to use. So as we improve and develop the thesaurus over the years, everyone that has implemented it gets the updates for free. And then, of course, this is a nice way to collaborate with other organizations that you want to connect your content with, because you can say, well, let's use the climate tagger, and okay, let's develop another area of the thesaurus, for example. We also have plugins for Drupal, and we have another plugin for WordPress. And then, of course, we have the for CTCN, which is the common use of the common tool used to open up government data. We have the Climate Tagger plugin developed for that as well. So it can be custom done, or you can use these plugins. And the plugins have various features that we're constantly working on so that we can allow all these use cases that I've described to be available. But at the moment, the Drupal plugin, for example, just has the similar document service that I've shown you here. So it's a wonderful tool, and we're very happy to be working on this project. We're very grateful to work with Semantic Web Company, who manages the software that we use to run the Climate Tagger in the background, which is PoolParty, which is a nice transition back to you, Martin.
That's an absolutely, thank you very much, Quinn. A great introduction and handing over to me. So I think we have to switch the screen now, Thomas, to my screen, so I can start with my presentation. Yeah, thanks a lot. So I will tell you a little bit about that, what is under the hood of the Climate Tagger. That is called PoolParty Semantic Suite. And as I just have recognized that we have a few new people here on the webinar, just 2 or 3 remarks regarding the whole webinar. So we will provide the slides, and I think Thomas already gave you the link to the website where it will be provided. We will collect them, and then we will send you a short email tomorrow, latest on Monday, and then you have access to the slides of this webinar and presentations. And we're also recording the webinar, so also the recording will be provided to invite friends or colleagues to take a look at what we are presenting today. Finally, before I start my presentation, you have a chat and we have a Q&A session after Sukaina, who is the last presenter today. And in this chat, you can put in questions at any time. We collect them, we pick them out, and then we will discuss and answer them in the Q&A session. So feel free just to put your questions into this little chat box at the bottom of the tool that you see in the webinar tool. Yeah, I said before, my name is Martin Kaltenberg. I'm Managing Partner and CFO of the Semantic Web Company, and I'm jumping now into the slides about PoolParty Suite, that is the underlying technology of the Climate Tagger. So Semantic Web Company sits in Vienna, in Austria. We're around 25 people. We are dealing with, I would say, linked data and semantic web-based data information and knowledge management. Our core product is PoolParty Suite, and we're working around the globe, so mainly in EU, in Australia, in Canada, and the United States, where we have our customers, and we have a very good partner network in that areas. What you see here on the left-hand side, a little bit for whom we are working. So on top a little bit customers of the area of sustainable development in similar areas, but also other. We are working a lot in industry and publishing and pharma and so on. And as we are only 25 people and working around the globe, we have a very good partner network that you see on the right-hand side. So we have business partners, integration partners, but also research partners that we work with. But going into the topic of PoolParty. So let's take a look how that works. The most important thing, and I think Quinn already started the introduction here, thanks for that, is when we model this thesaurus, we call it knowledge graphs, and I think the best example for a knowledge graph that is in place is the Google knowledge graph that is behind Google that we use every day. When we model these knowledge graphs, we're thinking about things and not strings anymore, and that's a very important thing. So here's a little example, just a simple one about Venice. So when we model such a graph, then we say, okay, there is a thing in place, and this thing is Venice that you see here as a bubble on the left-hand side, and then this thing has a place. Sorry, it has a place also, but it has a name that we call preferred level, that is Venice, and it can have a picture. And we then can accordingly, and this is what we do also in the Climate Tagger, we can say if we find Venice inside a text, for example, then we can accord it to the knowledge graph, and we find it, and we can identify it, this thing called Venice. But then there's the Piazza San Marco, so the St. Mark Square, and this is also a thing that we are aware of because it's in reality it is there. But here you say it can have different labels and different names, so it can be a St. Mark Square in English, English, but it can be Piazza San Marco in Italian. So what we can model are synonyms and hynonyms for misspellings, for example, but we can also model in different languages the names that are given to a thing. But the important thing about the thing is that the thing is always in the middle. So it has an identifier that is unique, and then it can have broader or narrower terms, as for example, St. Mark's Square is a place, it's a city square, and it's in Italian then a piazza, and so on and so forth. All right, and going ahead of this basic principle, what can I do with it? So on the left-hand side, you see the traditional approach of metadata management or management of data, and on the right-hand side, you see the graph-based approach. So if the user now says, or whoever, show me all documents about European countries, then on the left-hand side, you see what we do to every document we add on top of the countries that it's a European country. But we do it on a document level. And with a knowledge graph, we just do it one time, and then we make a connection between Norway, France, and Austria in our example with Europe. The same question or the same thing, that approach with a different question says, show me all documents about EU member countries. And what we are doing here is the same on the document level. In the traditional approach, we put European Union on top of France and of Austria. But in our knowledge graph, it's only a very, very little work, little effort to say, okay, Europe is on top, and the European Union is a part of it, and there you have countries like France and Austria. But in Europe, you also have a country that is Norway, but it's not part of European Union. And so we can go ahead and say, show me the French-speaking ones, and you see we add it on the left-hand side to every document. On the right-hand side, we just make a little note in the knowledge graph saying, what are French-speaking countries? In our example, it's France and Canada. So in the traditional approach, you see we do metadata per document, and in our new graph-based approach, we do knowledge about metadata. So it's much more little effort. It's somehow a centralized approach. You can use a standard knowledge graph in the middle of many sources, and this is what we make use of in PoolParty. And as it's in PoolParty, it's also used in the climate tagger. So it's, I would say, valid for both systems, for PoolParty and for the climate tagger, that these knowledge graphs make the data, the management of data and metadata much more easier. One good news also is that in PoolParty we are using SCOS. This is a W3C standard. That means World Wide Web Consortium has specified this as a guideline, as a standard. So we are fully following this SCOS standard that stands for Simple Knowledge Object System. And that means that data is also transferable, so you can use it with serverless systems, and everything follows this standard. So it's all about interoperability and connection. Okay, coming now into the detail of PoolParty, the system has three main areas. The one on the left-hand side is the PoolParty Thesaurus server. Quinn mentioned it a little bit, and here you see just an excerpt of the modeler, is that you model your knowledge graphs. You model your thesauri in here. So you see in our example on the screen we have regions, for example, and then we have continents and or the regions itself, and then we have the countries per regions and so on and so forth. And that makes it much more easier. It's a drag and drop system that you really can model big knowledge graphs, as I think Florian and or Quinn said before. The climate tagger knowledge graph of Thesaurus has 3,500 concepts in it at the moment in 5 languages. So an easy interface is very important to manage such a big knowledge graph. Then the second component or server we have in place is the PoolParty extractor. And this is what is used when you push a document into the climate tagger to analyze and give you back the relevant areas of climate change development, for example. And here in our example, you see that this extractor of PoolParty analyzes a text, and then it says, for example, Bain Capital, I find this in here in our knowledge graph, and I can make use of this network that I have behind, and then I can really give you back the tags or the concepts, as we say, so the things that we find in a text, and then this can be stored and can be used for further things. For example, here then in the power tagging, we implement the extractor and the Thesaurus server into several content management systems. So what we also have here together with the climate tagger and REEEP, there's an implementation in Drupal. For PoolParty, you also find implementations for SharePoint or for Confluence and even for other content management systems. And you can then have use cases on top like automatic tagging, text analysis, better search systems, recommendations or topic pages in your systems, and so on and so forth. So a few words about who is doing the work on here, and I start at the bottom. So I think Quinn is a very experienced taxonomist and ontologist in the meantime. That means she's modeling the knowledge graph of the climate tagger. So she works directly with the PoolParty Thesaurus in here. And we can also enrich these Thesaurus, and we are doing it with the climate tagger, one with third-party sources that we find on the internet that are free and open and called linked open data. So for example, the Thesaurus of the climate tagger is linked to DPpedia, that is the semantic web version of Wikipedia. It is also linked into AgroVoc, that's an FAO Thesaurus, and also into Gamut, that is an environmental Thesaurus of the environmental energy of Europe. Then you have developers, and developers then are building, for example, an API on top of PoolParty, like we did together with REEEP for the climate tagger. So the developer makes use of APIs, and then he can also provide the text extraction with PoolParty extractor. What also means, and what is very nice, when you push more and more text into the extractor, then there's also a loop back into the Thesaurus. So analyzing documents, because we are living in a dynamic world, gives you the opportunities to find more and more concepts fully automatically that are then suggested to the taxonomist again to put it into the knowledge model, because maybe new technologies are arising, new trends are coming up in documents, and then we can do that automatically, and the taxonomist can decide what is a good term going into this Thesaurus. And last but not least, they have a content manager, and that is then working with your content management system or with the climate tagger API or whatever, and can then is the user of the power tagging system or the integration of climate tagger into Drupal and makes use of the system itself. So here you see an overview over these three core components that I have mentioned before. So it's the PoolParty server, where you create these knowledge models or taxonomies or thesauri, however we will call it, with the important remark that everything becomes a URI, a uniformed resource identifier. We can also say just an identifier, that we know what to do with it. And we can make use of linking and mapping mechanisms, so we can link together different thesauri, but also third-party thesauri that are somewhere over the internet. Then we can have then, for example, to enrich our own knowledge model with synonyms, because in other knowledge models there are more synonyms inside, so you can make use of that and automatically fetch this into your system to then provide better services on top, and so on. The second component is PoolParty extractor. RDFization of text, but very important, extracting the things that we've seen before, but also extracting free terms. So we have also a mechanism inside that recognizes if there are terms that are not in the Thesaurus, not in the knowledge model, what are the important ones in a piece of content, in a piece of text. So you can do categorization and so on and so forth. And the third layer, it's the integration layer, then in your content management system, to have powerful services then on top of your content. For people that are interested in the technical architecture, I will not describe in detail because I'm running out of time of this, but this is the technical architecture, the overview, the rough one of PoolParty. And so we're doing a lot of things here inside of the semantic platform. And then here are the very rich APIs on top, to the interfaces to the outside world in this blue box, and this is exactly where the climate tagger API sits. So what we have done, we have used PoolParty, and on top of PoolParty we have implemented a very specific set of API methods and requests and so on and so forth that are part now only of the climate tagger, and you can make use of this wonderful system for free just by going and registering and having an API key and then making use of this climate technology and climate development thesaurus and service. So Finally, from my presentation, after this introduction about PoolParty and how it is used in the climate tagger, is who else is using it, just a few of an overview. So one good example is the EIP Water Marketplace. EIP stands for European Innovation Partnership on Water. The URL is eip-water.eu. And what we are doing here with the same technology and the same approach is we are building a marketplace, a matchmaking system between experts in the water sector that have different roles, so that, for example, people that are working in research can find people that are working in financing or in marketing, because they need it to foster and to push their innovations in the water sector. So somehow on this EIP on Water Marketplace, all the content nuggets, and the content nugget is also a person, is then interconnected, and you can easily bring together demand and supply. What is the overall idea of this EIP Water Marketplace? A second example where PoolParty is used is the World Bank Group. The World Bank Group has a very comprehensive Thesaurus or knowledge model in place with about, I'm not sure, but I think there are about 200,000 concepts in it. And the World Bank is using PoolParty also for vocabulary management, and you can take a look then at the output at the front end. It's available via the internet, and you will find the link in the slides when we send it out. You can explore this World Bank Thesaurus that is now on the rise to be used in more and more applications of the World Bank. The third one I have here in my slides is GPPN. GPPN is the Global Building Performance Network, and they have built a prediction tool for building performance. So you can then also PoolParty based, and a lot of data is inside, and models have been created. You can explore into over the next 30 years over choosing different indicators how building performance, or then the carbon carbon outcome or output, will develop over time when you go for different building performance indicators. Another one is the Council of European Union. Here we have made use of linked open data, and what you find in this example is it's on the Concilium. It's the voting results of the Lisbon Treaty. So all the votings since the last 5 years, I think, have been then published as linked open data, including a knowledge modeling behind, the Thesaurus again, and you can take a look at these data then and can make use and reuse. So all the data is open to be used. One more is a very nice one from Australia, from Health Direct Australia, who's the central information provider about all health information in Australia. And you see that at the bottom here, over 120 information sources that are in place have been harvested and put together by the use of one central vocabulary. And this vocabulary is again a thesaurus. It's the Austrian Health, Australian, not the Austrian. It's the Australian Health Thesaurus, the AHT. And by making use of a search system and of this thesaurus, of this knowledge model, they now have a very powerful search in place with autocomplete. When you start typing AS, then you get suggestions, autocomplete like asthma and so on and so forth, and a very good faceted search that you can have a single point of access on one place into all these 120 sources that are about health information in Australia. And finally, we have started together with REEEP, that's a common project of us, at CTCN, the Climate Technology Network, proof of concept about matchmaking. So it's a matchmaking assistant that now will be placed or will be integrated into the knowledge management system of CTCN. And this is developing countries are sending or uploading requests, let's say technical support request documents to this system, and the system automatically analyzes this and gives the assistant, the team member of CTCN, then suggestions who in the very broad network of CTCN can answer and support such a request regarding the sectors that are found, the technologies that are found, but also the regions that are found in these documents, and then mapping this to the partner profiles of the network, and then giving a suggestion to the team member, and then these requests can be supported better. Okay. And finally, and here I'm closing the loop back again, a very good success story where PoolParty is used is the REEEP Climate Tagger. You already have heard about a lot about this. And if you're interested to learn more, I would just like to invite you on the one hand side to go to our website, that is poolparty.biz, or just get in touch with me or my colleagues. And you can get for a free demo account, if you're interested, you just go to poolpartybiz/test-demo, but you will get the slides and there by the link. You can go for a free demo account and play around with our tool and learn more about it, how it can be used and how useful it is for your business or your organization. Here, last but not least, you get all my contact details, and here we'll stop my presentation and my talk. And I will hand over to Sukaina now. So finally, the fourth talk is now from Sukaina Barwani of SAE Oxford, and she will tell us about a use case where Climate Tagger is already implemented that is called weadapt.org.
Thank you, Martin. Are my slides visible?
Yes, they are.
Okay, great. So I'm just very quickly going to go over an example of how we are using Climate Tagger, why we think it's useful, and some future steps we're envisaging. And I think Florian's already gone over a lot of this in some detail. So very quickly, I'll just explain that weadapt is a collaborative platform on climate adaptation issues. The audience are researchers and practitioners and decision makers. And we have lots of user-generated, curated content on the platform, which is free and open access. And the key thing about this content is that we're trying to integrate it in intelligent ways using the semantic tagging tools that we've been discussing. And we currently use two tagging services. One is Climate Tagger, and the other is OpenCalais. And there are some significant advantages of Climate Tagger over OpenCalais, which is some of the examples I'll show here. So why are we using Climate Tagger? This is really related to a lot of the things Florian's already mentioned in terms of this mass of information production, especially in the area of climate adaptation. There are numerous platforms emerging every day, and this leaves users lost and confused in terms of what is the information they should be looking at, what is the high quality information they should be trusting, and where should they be going for guidance, basically. weadapt ethos is very much around creating a collaborative platform, but at the same time, in so doing, we have to avoid contributing to this problem because we also generate a lot of content. We have over 2,500 members, and we could fall into the same trap of just adding to this confusion. So the way in which we're using the tagging system is basically this is an example of one of our articles, and the tagging system enables us to add keywords to content, which is quite common, and everyone's familiar with that on different websites. The other type of content we have is case studies, so they sit on our map, which we call the adaptation layer, and a case study looks something like this on the map. If we go to add keywords in the back end of this content, what happens is if we add some text or some a combination of text and images, that the system will ask whether you would like keywords to be suggested for this bit of text in the same way that Quinn was describing. And at the top here you see we have different parts of our content, and if you do want keywords to be suggested in this tab here under tags, the keywords will be suggested based on that text, and then they can be applied based on the ones you choose, and you can also suggest new tags that maybe don't come up. And the two services at the moment suggest different sets of tags. So in the front end, that allows us to make the tags visible in this way, and it's for the two reasons that Florian already mentioned. One is because we want to provide systematization of our data. We want to be able to actually, from a knowledge manager's point of view and from a researcher point of view, we want to be able to meta-analyze and do some analysis on this data because it's a very rich knowledge base, but at the same time we want to provide additional learning for our users. So we want to be able to say there's actually other content you should be looking at. If you're interested in adaptive capacity, actually there's other recommended content related to that hierarchy of concepts that Quinn mentioned that you should also be looking at. And so in that way it's a learning platform, and that's what we're trying to facilitate. But in this case, for example, if you were to click on adaptive capacity as a keyword in this article, you would find all the other articles that we have that also have adaptive capacity as a keyword. In the same way, you could do the same for downscale climate data, which is quite a niche area of work, but we have content on that, and you can pull it all up by doing the same thing. Another example of where in our research we've tried to apply a tagging approach using Climate Tagger is with work we've done with UNEP and with an EC project called Mediation, where we were trying to provide, again, systematized guidance on tools and methods that should be applied in the adaptation learning cycle. And this resulted in a set of decision trees, quite complicated decision trees in different layers, which led users down a particular pathway to choose different tools and methods. And this is an online platform that was developed for this project. And for example, this condition in this decision tree, vulnerability indication, was a new tag that we added to WeAdapt to link to our case studies. So if you were to click on that condition, you would find a case study in WeAdapt that was actually tagged with the same key term, vulnerability indication. And this is that case study, and you can see vulnerability indication is one of the tags that appears here. And so this is another way that we've used to try and link different knowledge systems and different platforms together in a more intuitive and less redundant way. And again here, if you click on vulnerability indication, you can see all the other pieces of content that were that had the same term applied to it. And you can imagine that if researchers were more consistent in how they applied their terminology, then you would have a lot more content that used the same term in the same way across different projects, which is where we're trying to get to with reducing this fragmentation and overproduction of knowledge. So this is just a snapshot of the different terms and how many times they've been applied in the knowledge base. This is a combination of both OpenCali and Climate Tagger. And one of the advantages that we see with Climate Tagger is that you can see these ones are very general terms, and these are actually coming from OpenCali. But what we've definitely seen as an advantage of Climate Tagger is there's more specificity in the terms, and that's much more valuable to a lot of the work that we're doing. And so one of the ways that we've tried to meta-analyze a lot of the content is through data visualization. So we've taken these tags and applied some visualization techniques to them, and that was possible because of the tags that were applied to the content, but also the organizations in WeAdapt as entities. So we were basically able to see which organizations are working on which subject areas and who are the biggest contributors to WeAdapt. So the larger the node, the larger the contributions on the site, and the closer they are together, the more the similar areas are that they work on together. And this was interesting because it was using a lot of the general terms, but I can imagine if we were to do this exercise again, and this is like 2 years later, with the more specific terms of Climate Tagger, it would be even more interesting. So that's a really exciting area we'd like to explore further, and you can do some nice things with infographics with the tags and see which organizations are doing which work in which key areas and so on. And just in terms of next steps, some of the things that we'd like to explore are in other research projects we have ongoing. We're trying to link climate change adaptation and the area of disaster risk reduction. So it would be interesting to see if we could develop the Climate Tagger in that area and expand the Thesaurus in that way, as Quinn described. There's also a lot of monitoring and evaluation work that's being done in the area of climate finance and in trying to monitor impact of various development agencies, and that would be another area that we'd like to look at. in terms of learning and feedback, obviously with this large community of users that we have, we do have access to experts who may come up with new terms, and so to have this learning loop and feedback between WeAdapt and the climate tagger would be great, because we could directly feed back to the thesaurus and introduce new terms and concepts. And another next step that we see is that there is location data in the climate tagger, which is really useful and not being utilized enough in WeAdapt. And we would like to use that to start to locate our articles on our adaptation layer map, as well as our case studies. And then finally, as Quinn mentioned, the common pool is something that we haven't taken advantage of yet, but we see a lot of potential for it in terms of creating this smart knowledge grid around adaptation and not replicating information unnecessarily, and trying to reduce the redundancy that we see more and more of at the moment, unfortunately. So that was just my quick intro. Happy to have any questions or feedback, and with that I'm going to hand back to Martin.
Thanks a lot, Sukaina. Yeah, we have a couple of questions coming in. A short remark, we have a little bit time for more of them, so if you're interested or you have any questions, just use the chat please in the panel, or in the little at the bottom of the tool you have in place. There's a chat where you can put in your questions. I pick one. I think it's regarding Quinn and or Florian on the climate tagger. The question is, how is the governance model for climate tagger to make decisions about new terms coming in? So what, also here, what is your modeling approach?
Quinn, do you want to take this?
Sure, thank you. Thank you for the question. It's a very good one, and we do get that question quite often. So, which should I start with? I guess it would make sense to start with the modeling approach, because that brings in the governance. So when we get a project to develop an area of the thesaurus, so for example, monitoring and evaluation for Sukaina and WeAdapt, the project sponsor is the owner of the decision as to what is developed. So that person would connect me and anyone else managing the thesaurus with a number of experts around the globe, and those experts would give me their publications, number of PDFs and websites which have that theme within them, which they would like to see tagged. And I develop a mind map within something called MindMeister. And what happens is, as I discuss the field of the expertise, so monitoring and evaluation, with 15 experts around the globe, First, I analyze their documentation and provide them with ideas as to what this field should look like according to the way that the research is presented, and I create a mind map from that. And I document every single portion of our discussions, and have meeting notes, and then I will present that mind map to the next expert and say, look, does this make sense to you, and so on. Any conflict and opinion I document, and then I use consensus to provide the final mind map to Sukaina, for example, if she were to be the owner of the project. And then the final decision as to the new development is made by the sponsor of the project. Now, when it comes to changing those concepts in the future, we don't like to change preferred labels if we don't have to. What we prefer to do is, if there's, say for example, we finish monitoring and evaluation for Sukaina, and then when it gets tested, Sukaina comes back and says, oh, I'd really like to see theory of change with a capital T instead of a lowercase. And I would say, okay, well, let's keep the preferred label unless it was really important. And of course, there's always exceptions to changing such a thing. But what I can do is I can make a synonym, so the system can catch the alternative spelling and still display the same preferred label. So basically, by expanding the net as to which alternative spellings or ways of explaining a concept, we use the synonyms. Now, if we were to deal with the bridge between climate change adaptation community and disaster risk management, that would be a bit more complicated, because of course in those fields the experts will use the same word. The idea of risk is often interpreted differently amongst those two groups. So we would probably, this is a project we really have been wanting to do for a number of years, and when that does happen, we will have to expand that expert panel and have more dialogue around it. Ideally, somebody from the climate change adaptation community and somebody from disaster risk management being the project owners, so that the final decision is with the project owners, but the debate around those concepts would be heavily recorded and then communicated throughout the project, the process of the project. Now, so that explains basically the development of an area of the Thesaurus and how we would deal with small changes in terms of the concepts. But in terms of governance, so the tool is owned by REEEP. So we make the tool available for free and so on, and we make decisions based on our own expertise for managing the Thesaurus using principles that are set out by Semantic Web Company in terms of best practices. Best practice not to use plurals, for example. And of course, when we're doing quality assurance checks, so we do have abilities to do quality assurance on a regular basis, and we can catch concepts that are being found on a lot of portals, for example, that aren't actually in the Thesaurus. We can make decisions, okay, well, we should really add that in, and so we're just further enhancing it. But we don't have a process of going back to the owner of a project unless, for example, if we were to develop the climate technologies for CTCN, which is also on the table, we certainly wouldn't change anything that we developed for them without having a discussion. And I would mostly just use the synonyms to deal with any new concepts that are coming in. And of course, if I was unsure where to put it within the Thesaurus, I would go back to the experts and talk to them about it and make a well-informed decision by talking to a few experts. Does that answer the question?
Absolutely, Quinn. Thanks a lot. I think we've gained a great insight into your process, and as far as I know, you're also very experienced in that. So I'm just trying to jump to one other slide because we have a couple of questions regarding taxonomies, thesauri, and ontologies also here. So what is the difference? How does it work with PoolParty, and so on and so forth. So I was adding this slide in the meantime. So it says from simple SCOS to large knowledge graphs, and reading it from the left to the right. In principle, I tried to make it short. So what we understand between these different terms, a taxonomy is just a hierarchy of terms or a flat list of terms. So you have just a broader and a narrow and a top or a down in a hierarchy. Going from a taxonomy then to the thesaurus means a SCOS thesaurus that is a standard by World Wide Web Consortium is that you have a little bit more of a complex graph, I would say. So you have relations that are broader, that are above in a hierarchy, or narrower, that are below in a hierarchy. But then you have also relations. And relations means that you can have a relation from a concept to an absolutely different area in your hierarchy or in your graph that you build relations, but it's just named, it's a relation of. So broader, narrow, and relation are the three allowed relations that you have in a SCOS thesaurus, and this is the case in the climate tagger. And then if you go into the area of ontologies, or OWL ontologies, then you can name the relations in between, and that's the third step, I would say, in this area. So you can not only say it is a relation of, you can say, I don't know, organization A has skills, and then B, you can have a list of skills, or you have a concept that is a skill. So you can name relations as you want to name that. And after that, what can you do with PoolParty from left to right? So what you can start with is really a flat taxonomy. You can just use something that you have in place. And I know all these terms are a little bit confusing because I would say taxonomy and thesaurus and then vocabularies or controlled vocabularies are often very used as similar things, but just a flat list of terms, if you would like to say. You can start from that, you import it, and then PoolParty makes a SCOS thesaurus out of it automatically following the standard. And then you can start to make structure inside of it. And if you do the second step, then by editing this, by inviting people and experts, for example, following the governance or the process that REEEP is doing for the climate tagger with collaborative workflows and so on and so forth, you can expand this model. You can also use your documents and analyze them to find new terms that you can put in such a thesaurus. And then what allows PoolParty also as a third step, you can say, I will make something to go into the direction of SCOS-XL. So SCOS-XL is a little bit an expansion of SCOS, of a thesaurus, but you can also say you use existing ontologies, so you can import schema.org, for example. That is a very important one because it's driven by the main search engines, or Dublin Core, that is used since a long time in libraries to explain information or metadata about publications and similar things. And you can load them into the PoolParty, and you can make use of these schemas. And you can also create your own one, so you can name relations between terms and so on and so forth. And then you can really link it, and you can map it with other ones and so on and so forth to build a very rich knowledge graph. So you can start with a simple thing, and you can go up into an OWL ontology to a very complex thing to describe the domain you're working in. We always recommend, and we have seen that it's a very good approach to start very simple with a taxonomy, with a thesaurus, and then, if needed, also depending on the use case, going into a more complex area. So that's it from this side to hopefully also answer that question. We have another one in place, and I think then we're a little bit running out of time, and this goes to both to WeAdapt and to the climate tagger. And it says, it is nice to know that initiatives like WeAdapt are using climate tagger and contributing to the content pool. Is there a list of contributors to the content pool? So it's a little bit more into the direction of the climate tagger team, please.
Hello? Yes.
Yes.
Well, I'll answer the list question. We do have a list, and at the moment it's relatively short, which we see as a good opportunity because everything in there is quality. We have CTCN, Energypedia, LedgeGP, Regal, which is our own policy database website, and there's also mitigation action plans and scenarios. That's all that's in there at the moment. So it's basically the climate tagger has had a long evolution of since 2011. It's taken us a while to get to this point where the branding is so easy to articulate and so on. So the content pool was always something that was more difficult to get to when we were discussing the climate tagger with people that were interested. Now that we have these plugins that are that exist and being further developed, it's easier to get to that conversation of the content pool, and we're hoping to have international organizations and all of those working within climate change space to start to use the content pool.
Okay, thank you very much. And then a different one to Sukaina here on WeAdapt. I think you mentioned it briefly, but to answer the question directly, is there a way back from WeAdapt to climate tagger if new concepts or tags are suggested by users?
Yeah, this is something that we've done with Quinn and Florian manually, but we don't have it working in an automated way yet. So this is one of the next steps I was talking about that we'd like to facilitate, since we do have this rich user base and they are sometimes contributing new terms. We would like to develop that feedback loop back to the climate tagger, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. And the final one to the climate tagger team, is there a timeline for additional features for the Drupal module?
Florian, would you like to take that one?
Yes, I can do. Well, currently we are in discussion with a few funders for new features. I think some of the most important ones that we hope will come in the next few months, speaking about 3-4 months hopefully, is that we want to extend the possibilities of the Drupal module to also include the content pool, and that ties to Quinn's comment about the use of the content pool. We want to make it easier for people to do that, and that would require that it's part of the content of the Drupal plugin and not only of the API functionality. So that we hope will come very soon. And the second bigger change and development that is happening in the next few months is that currently a there was a request from several organizations that they could select parts of the thesaurus that are used for tagging, so that not the whole thesaurus is used, but only parts of the thesaurus, like an energy efficiency organization who only wants to use the energy efficiency thesaurus and not also the renewable energy thesaurus, to ensure that the tagging is accurate. This is also an extension that is coming in the next few months.
Thank you very much, Florian. So I think we're already 10 minutes over time. So as I've been told, we are over time. So I would like to thank you all. I would like to thank mainly our panelists